The best of the week on Relevant Radio.
You want to talk about a trend I've been noticing, and Dave Durand is going to be stopping by. I want to get his take on this. He gave a presentation to Relevant Radio, I think it was last year, and he made some comments there that I thought were really insightful regarding his own kids, but I want to talk about it. There's a trend, at least I've been noticing in our society today, and that's that young adults are now moving back home with their parents. They're living with their parents in numbers. We have not really seen these numbers in generations, so you might think that, it's a sign of the times, and maybe it is. I mean, is it the economy? Economy's tough. Is it housing prices? I mean, how does somebody buy a first-time home, right? The prices are skyrocketing, and interest rates are on the climb. Student debt, it's totally different than I think previous generations. The amount of money that a lot of college kids now own, just to be able to pay their loans and their car payment and whatever. I mean, sometimes you got to go home. Housing prices are out of reach. Student debt, like I said, it's like a ball and chain. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Let's start with some of the basics. I think more adults today, and I'll give you some stats, living at home in their late 20s, maybe even in their 30s, than any other point since 1940s. And the percentage of young adults who live at home, one of the stats I saw is the highest it has been in 85 years, almost a century. So back then, you got to go take a look at the time. I mean, that's post-Depression, the Great Depression. We were heading into World War II. It was a time that families maybe huddled together out of necessity. But what about today? What is keeping these young adults at home today? No denying economic pressures are real. That's one thing. The cost of living, yeah, I know it's skyrocketed. We've gone through this whole litany of things, but is there something else at play? When young adults stay at home, they're surrounded by the comfort and security of their parents, right? Are they missing out on an opportunity to step into the challenges that will help them grow? Back in the 1940s, again, I know it's a long time ago, young men and women were stepping into enormous responsibility. They took challenges that were different and very serious. But what I was thinking about is, okay, there's a lot of reasons we can explain why they're at home. Is it the parents' problem? Have we not challenged our kids? Are we making it too easy for them? Are we preparing our young adults for the challenges of life? You don't know the day or the hour God's going to call you home, right? Will your children be capable of handling that? Are you holding them back by doing everything for them, by making it super easy, paying the cell phone bill, covering all the loans, keeping them in the house? I know as parents, you want what's best for your children. You want to protect them. You want to support them. You want to give them everything they need. I'm the same way. Believe me, I have to take the plank out of my own eye before I take the speck out of anyone else's. But there is a fine line between support and enabling, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. When does helping become a hindrance? And how do you know when it's time to push somebody out of the nest, even when it's hard? I'll share a true story. I knew a mother. Her husband had passed away, and she had just one daughter. And the daughter was college educated, could have gone out and got jobs. But I think she probably struggled with anxiety, never really did, had a menial job. And the mother always made it so comfortable for her not to go out. One day the mother dies, right? God calls her home, really quite prematurely. This girl, her world was turned upside down. I mean, she didn't know up from down. She didn't know what to do. Suddenly, she was thrust into reality. And that mother, in some respects, did her daughter a real disservice. It took the girl a long time to finally get on her feet. But life is a very tough teacher, right? The hard knocks will sober you up pretty quick. And she had to get out of that lifestyle that she was in. But, this is not just also about children. It's really about the future of families in a much bigger picture. It's about communities, about the church. If young people are not stepping into their roles as independent adults, what does it mean for the future? What's it mean for the next generation? The choices that we make today ripple out until tomorrow. And the habits that we form now, they shape the kind of world that we live in. So what's this mean for the next generation and for their children? A lot of kids getting married later, having kids later. Let's have a conversation about it. And I'm not doing this out of judgment or frustration. I want to have a conversation out of love. And we've invited Dave Durand, who's the executive chairman and the co-founder of Best Version Media. It's an international media company located in Brookfield, Wisconsin. Also a regular contributor to Morning Air and the founder of a great organization called Leading Giants. You can check him out, leadinggiants.com. Dave does a show here at Relevant, and I get to enjoy it on the weekend. Saturday, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. If you ever want to tap into his expertise and genius, just take a listen to that. Again, 1 Central, 2 Eastern, right here on Relevant Radio. And it's great to have Dave with us today. Dave, good afternoon.
Hey, Drew, great to be with you.
You gave us a talk here at Relevant Radio last year and told us what you do with your kids to get them out the door. And I'd love you to share that. It was kind of a sobering thought. I think a lot of people were thinking about that. But give me your take on the numbers that I just laid out. I know you probably saw the similar articles and the data that I had come across. What's happening culturally here? What's the role of the parents? What's the role of the kids? How do you see this? And then maybe you can share some of your own experience.
Yeah, starting kind of with an analysis of the circumstance, it is very hard to not sound judgmental, even if that's not where your intention is on this topic. So I just want to begin that way. And I'll give you an example why. Because you never really know the weight and burden that people are going through that led to the particular circumstance that they're in. But it doesn't mean that you don't make an assessment to what it is when you're actually there. And I think the expectation of this is one thing. So, for example, when we raise children as though they're going to be future children, we have a problem. And so if you were to look at somebody said, you know what, my son is living with me right now. He's 28 years old. And I'd say, tell me more about it. Well, he's an engineer. He's fully employed. He's doing really well in his particular circumstance. He's contributing to the bills right here. It's a pleasure to have him around because, my gosh, I don't have to mow the lawn, and he does the dishes all the time. And it just happens to be kind of a unique circumstance with where he is because he's moving next year to so-and-so. Okay, well, fine. But what you find for most people who are living at home with their parents is they're not productive. Now, there is somebody out there that is productive. That's why I led with that example, so nobody is offended and saying, well, that's not my case. But normally, they're in their basement watching video games, or they're a barista someplace, and they don't have aspirations to take risks or do anything. And the reason for it is because when they were given $100 in 3rd grade, their parents made them do something with the money and didn't allow them to make a mistake with it, as opposed to wasting it on candy when their brother or sister made a better investment with it and had some reward from it later on and feeling that pain. Later on, they help them with their homework so they don't get in trouble with the teacher, and then they put them on whatever it's called Life 360 app, where until they're 26 years old, they know everywhere they go within 3 feet, everything they spend, how fast they drive, and they have raised a compliant, fearful child. They have not raised a willing adult. There's a difference between getting your homework done because, somebody put guardrails up and getting your homework done because you know you're a better person when you do it. So the expectations are set differently. The other thing, Drew, that's interesting is if you look at it, the second largest expense that parents help their adult children with is cell phone and streaming subscriptions. So it also tells you that when people say, well, there's a need to help them with this, is it really a need? Do they have to do it? The reason you can't move out on your own is because you need a 3-bedroom house in a beautiful place with 2 wonderful cars? No. How about go live in a studio apartment, and if you can't afford the studio apartment in that city, move to a city where you can afford it and start to take risks so you can build into something. And if you wonder why the child is depressed when they're 32 years and living at home, well, I can tell you why. It's because they're 32 years old and living at home.
And my wife and I, Kathy and I, we have this discussion sometimes. When we were raising our kids, we wanted to make sure that they, did well academically in school, that they'd go on and get a degree. People who have college degrees tend to make, they say, more money on average, $1 million over the course of their lifetime. I mean, you have all the data, all those stats that are out there. But then part of the problem is you never want them to fail. And a lot of parents end up doing things for their kids that I think will short circuit their confidence, and we have an epidemic in the culture today of anxiety. And I'm thinking, well, is that because everybody gets a trophy? Because every parent doesn't want their child to fail? Is it because, we're paying the cell phone bills? We're doing all these things that you mentioned? Your thoughts on this incredible level of anxiety that we're seeing amongst our kids today? Of course, there's some evidence that cell phones play a big role in that.
Oh, yeah.
But their ability to go out into the workplace and to get a job and to live on their own. I think life is a great teacher. And I once heard an inspirational speaker once tell me, don't show me your successes, show me your failures. I mean, he wanted to see the path that you took to get where you are today. But your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and by the way, I think one of the ways that we take this conversation that can be charged and remove the charge is, let's not look at the staying at home with your parents thing as the circumstance. Let's look at whether or not the child is living a responsible, fulfilling life and taking appropriate risks. Then it really kind of doesn't matter as much where they live, which I think is the important thing. But yeah, the reason they have anxiety is because they have not been given the muscle to fail. It is absolutely true. When somebody's in the last place and they have to learn that. So this is a fortunate thing. I'm one of 5. My brother's a year older. My brother's a year younger. They were like all conference and everything. They were 4.0s and everything. I meandered along with a 3.0. And, you know, I did not get the accolades that they had. I had to learn what it was like to lose a lot. And building that muscle made me not care so much about losing. But can you imagine the anxiety of experience for the first time failure, or for the first time physical pain, or for the first time physical exertion, or for the first time loss? Oh my gosh, if you've never experienced that, the anxiety would build and build and build every single year. And that softness becomes very dangerous. When people turn this into if you live at home and as an adult, this is a condemnation of the parent and the child as bad. That's a very silly thing to do, because there are mitigating circumstances or sacrificial things that people are doing for a very, very good thing. In other words, they should be complimented for it. But what I found is that most people who have their adult children living at home in the traditional criticism sense, they don't like it. They're like, yeah, they're 27. I don't know how to get them out there. I feel bad now because they're depressed, they have anxiety. They're not really working. So they're equally frustrated by that. And that's the general topic that we're having. We're not having the 35-year-old person whose father is sick and moved back in to take care. That's not the topic. So I think that's an important thing to do. And then we look at this from a preventative measure. But here's the main thing. If you treat somebody as a person you respect and an adult, and you tell them that you believe in them and that they can do it, and then you give them the chance to, they're usually going to take you up on that.
That sounds great. Hey, Dave, if people want to follow you, get connected to you, listen to you, what's the best way to do that?
You know, my YouTube channel is probably the best way, Durand On Demand, or if they just look for Dave Durand. And thanks so much, Drew, for the time today. It was great being on with you.
I love it. Durand On Demand. That's great. We'll check it out. All right, Dave, thanks. We'll catch up.
Thanks, Drew.
Dave Durand, we'll have him back. We'll talk about his latest book. And, of course, check out 12men.net.
Hey, like what you just heard? Then share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.